All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to talk about something very, very, very important today. If you plan on pulling any of the new units that are going to be arriving in 2.4, if you're looking to prioritize units like Cartethyia or Lupa and get the most out of their kits and the most out of their damage potential, you're going to want to do something as soon as possible when you get into the patch. And that is, of course, farm for some of their echoes. And what you're going to be seeing over here are the two new Sonata sets that we're going to have live in version 2.4, Windward Pilgrimage and Flaming Clawprint. And when we just go over some of the specifics, some of the details about how these two sets work, believe me when I say you're going to want to get a lot of pieces of this really, really, really fast. One tip I have for all of you before we even get into the breakdown is how you can potentially farm some of these new sets immediately. But before we get into it, if you're looking to pick up Cartethyia or Lupa, who use these sets using Lunite, you'd probably like to save some cash. LD Shop is a fantastic way of doing that, and I'll show you exactly why. LDShop.gg gives you access to huge discounts on pretty much anything you can buy in a ton of games. But let's click on Woowa for now. The monthly pass? Usually it's $5 reduce, but on LD Shop, it'll be much less. What a deal! To claim one of these discounts, just select the item you're looking for and click Top Up to submit your payment. You'll need your Curl linked account email, password, and username. This might seem a bit off, but remember that LD Shop already works with sensitive account information with their emulator, LD Player, so you can trust them for their services. They also have excellent reviews on Trustpilot. If you created an account with Gmail or Facebook, use the directions in the top-up menu to link your account to an email. After finalizing your payment info, wait a couple of minutes and your items will be on your account. New users can get a 10% discount and an additional 5% using my sponsored link, and first-time top-up bonuses are available as well. That means you can get some big discounts. Spending $80 or more will net you a VIP membership, which can get you a free 30-day Lunite subscription. So try LD Shop today. As you're all pretty familiar, we do have the Depths of the Elusive Realm weekly game mode, where this is an alternative to farming tacit fields. My tip for you, if you want to potentially pre-farm for some of these echoes, is to just go ahead, only progress to the 5th stage of this 13-stage game mode, which only takes you around 3 to 4 minutes, and then use this to spend your wayplates on. If you go ahead and do that, what you're going to find in your inventory is not a bunch of echoes, but actually unborn echoes. And what you'll notice is that you can redeem these from any of the tacit fields that exist in the game. Yeah, this is Fantasies of the Thousand Gateways, not really the Elusive Realm, but it's related to the Elusive Realm. And so this is the thing, guys. Sets have been retroactively added to the unborn echoes. Bior Waters, which gives the Midnight Veil and the Gusts of Welkin set, was not actually in here when the Thousand Gateways released back in version, I do believe it was 2.1. And then in 2.2, when Gusts of Welkin was released, these were retroactively added. And so a lot of people are believing, considering that every single tacit field in the game is currently on here, a lot of people are believing that the new tacit fields, these two new sets, is going to actually be added to the Unborn Echoes box. So that's the first thing right off the bat that we're going to get on into. So let's go ahead, and now that we're done here, we're actually going to end and finalize this, earn 450 elusive points, which is okay, and then just go ahead and restart it again for another run. That's going to be the fastest way to do it. That was just for demonstrative purposes though. Let's get right back on into our actual overview now. So now that we've got that settled, let's talk a little bit about these two sets. And the first one that we're going to be talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is actually going to be Windward Pilgrimage. And when you look at the symbol of this set, one thing that might look really familiar to you is the fact that it looks exactly like Gusts of Welkin. And the fact of the matter is that this set, if it's going to be used on Cartethyia, who's able to apply Aero Erosion by herself and is likely going to be used with teammates that apply Aero Erosion, like Chakona, this set is actually better for a DPS than Gusts of Welkin. And it is objectively better for Cartethyia than any of the existing Aero sets in the game. Let's run a couple of comparisons to see what we're running up against here when it comes to Windward Pilgrimage. So the first set that we're going to take a look at is the baseline 1.01. And I'll just go ahead and move my camera over here so that's really easy for us to see stuff. It's going to be the baseline 1.01. And when we look into the details, you're going to see that this set just gives you, at a total, 40% Aero damage bonus for 15 seconds after using an intro skill. When you directly compare it to Windward Pilgrimage, this gives you 40% Aero damage and a whopping 10% crit rate as long as you just hit something with Aero erosion. This actually makes this set usable on Gian if you're using him with a sub DPS like Chikona, and straight up just gives way more stats. It is low-key actually a little bit broken. It's a little bit too strong, in my opinion. But overall, we've been seeing that Sonata sets have progressively been getting a lot more strong relative to version 1.0 sets as time has happened. So that's what it looks like in comparison to the 1.0 Sierra Gale set. It's very, very, very clear which one's better than the other. Now, let's get into what Gusts of Welkin looks like and get into why this other new set is so good. So Gusts of Welkin gives the same exact 40% damage bonus, where first it's a 10%, then a 15% to the entire team, and then an additional 15% for the resonator that triggers it. This is typically on the person that's using the Aero set and applying the erosion, and so Chikona kind of is the ideal character to have this. However, that's missing the 10% crit rate and instead trading the 10% crit rate for a 15% to the team. The end result of combining Gusts of Welkin with Windward Pilgrimage is that Cartethyia, when she equips this, then has a sub DPS that's wearing Gusts of Welkin, she's gonna have 40% Aero damage, plus 15 from Gusts of Welkin, and then 10% crit rate on top of it. That's a lot of damage bonus. That's an insane amount of damage bonus. And then you factor in something like Chikona's 24% Aero damage bonus from doing a solo concert. Boy, oh boy, you're going to be literally at 79% Aero damage bonus from having Chikona on your team with Gusts of Welkin. What this also means is that if you're running the Aero Rover team, for example, with Chikona, you actually want Aero Rover on Windward Pilgrimage as well. Because Gusts of Welkin, ladies and gentlemen, Gusts of Welkin does not stack. And so you're going to have one person on Gusts of Welkin applying the 15% buff, and then both Aero Rover and Cartethyia should probably be running Windward Pilgrimage so that Aero Rover can benefit from those nice crit boosts, and then Cartethyia can also benefit from them as well. Because one thing for certain when it comes to these sets is that, let's take a look at this, Cartethia's sword, which gives a 20% Aero damage bonus to Rover and a 20% Aero damage bonus to Cartethyia, we all know it's going to be for her, right? In-game currently, I know it's not officially revealed yet, but we all know it's going to be for her. If this resonator is Rover Aero or question mark grants another 10% for 20 total, that's going to be for Cartethyia, okay? Everyone knows it's literally her sword, Remini Fleur-de-Lis. It's literally just going to be for Cartethyia. So, yeah, they're both going to get a 20% Aero damage bonus just from having the sword. And when Cartethyia is combining that with all the bonuses from Chikona, guys, that's going to be a 99% Aero damage bonus just from having that teammate and just from having this set active, and Gusts of Welkin too. So a lot of stuff is going on over here. These are all of the different mobs that are going to be able to drop this set. So we have one of the new bosses over here. I do believe this is going to be the Kelpie. The other 4 cost is of course going to be the Cartethyia weekly boss, and then we're going to have some of the new enemies and Capitanius as the 3 costs. And so you can either use your unboard echoes if they're added, or you're going to be able to farm enemies like the Karasaur, and I do believe the Pilgrim's Shell. These are going to be the 2 3-cost elite class enemies that are going to be able to provide that new set for everybody over here. And then when it comes to the 1 cost, you're going to have the Secretos, which is an enemy that we see a lot in Avenolium. 4 of the different Drakes, the Glacial one, the Fusion one, the Spectra one, the Havoc one, and then not the Pilgrim's Shell, but the Devotee's Flesh, which is like the 1 cost of these like absolutely like eldritch fucking abominations that are getting added in 2.4. I think these are like lost pilgrims from the voyages that have been turned into whatever the hell this is. Yeah, so these enemies over here, the nasty looking ones, and this lizard man, they're gonna be some pretty high priority targets for that echo farming if you are trying to get the Cartethyia as strong as possible, or you go with the unborn echoes method, assuming that works. And hopefully we have expressed why this set is so high value. Because in my opinion, you're going to want one on Aero Rover because they have decent damage potential. And you're also going to want one on Cartethyia because, of course, very good damage potential. And by having this sword available on the new set, it's going to make more boss run farms on that weekly boss as well to get all the substats that you need. One last thing to note is that before using tacit fields, before going to like all these different farming methods, I do believe you might actually have to unlock these echoes first in the databank by, you know, collecting them once in the overworld. That will unlock them to their full level and actually make them drop from tacit fields. Otherwise, you might run into some issues not being able to get the right exact one cost you want. And the last thing that I'll mention when it comes to farming is make sure when it comes to your databank, you're using your main stat selectors so you can get more of that arrow damage bonus on the things that you're going to need it for. Because you can always just go ahead, and even if you're on a 4 cost, right, change it to the stat you need. They've given us a lot of these. I'm pretty sure there are even more in 2.4's events, as well as the Coral Shop. So you'll be able to hopefully get this farming process done a lot faster than you typically would have in the past. Now, it's time for us to move on to the next Echo set. And this one is going to be Flaming Clawprint. And this one over here, ladies and gentlemen, has a bit of a different focus. Instead of arrow damage, it's going to focus on fusion damage, and of course, fits with the fact that Lupa is a fusion resonance liberation damage dealer. The 5-piece set bonus is casting the resonance liberation increases the fusion damage of resonators in the team by 15%, and then the caster's resonance liberation damage by 20%, lasting for 35 seconds. And so this clearly is a bit more of a supportive set. This is something that actually provides, if Resonance Liberation is the main damage of the dealer, it actually provides more overall damage bonuses than Molten Rift, which gives you a 10% bonus at a baseline and then 30% more for 40 total after using a resonance skill. And the thing is, if your Resonance Liberation is your main way of dealing damage, that'll be 10 plus the 15% from the team for 25, and then 20% more in Resonance Liberation damage for 45% total. But if your character is one that doesn't primarily deal Resonance Liberation damage, like a Chang Li, like an Encore, like a Chisha, who have way more split across like Resonance skill, basic attacks, heavy attacks, that sort of stuff, this set is actually going to be a DPS loss in their personal damage, but then grant that 15% buff to the team. And so, unfortunately, it does seem like this set is only going to be best in slot for one specific user. And I do believe that one is going to be Lupa. And so we can imagine in Lupa's kit, she's going to have more ways to buff members of her team. And it's pretty clear by now, based off the fact that she's kind of like a support buffer, she's meant to be used with, of course, Chang Li herself, who goes ahead and buffs Resonance Liberation damage on her outro skill, assuming that's Lupa's main form of damage, which it pretty much clearly is based off her Key Sonata set, and Brant, who is the healer in this team, the healer, the shielder, and the sustain, and is also going to be somebody, guys, that can go ahead and benefit from that fusion damage bonus. So the core team is going to be, assuming that, you know, we just do a little bit of replacement here, think of Mortefi as the Lupa. You'll have Chang Li, Brant, and then Lupa over here. Lupa's the damage buffer. Brant is the sustain. Chang Li is the, I guess, the burst damage, the very, like, selfish damage buffer who provides no buffs or sustain to the team, only her outro skill, and it's like a shorter outro skill too. So that's essentially what's going on. And as we saw from Lupa's kit, let me go pull up some footage of Lupa's kit. She's got quite a bit of aerial moves in her attacks. Let's take a look over here. A lot of aerial attacks, a lot of quick swap potential with a character like Brant, and of course, Chang Li benefits a lot from aerial attacks too. Yep, she's already in the air.
With me to victory! Die, evil!
And you see what's going on over there. Aerial attacks, I think she's made for quick swap. And with that buffing that she's going to be able to provide to the team,
I'm joining your battle.
I think that you're going to have a lot of success. And so, this team in particular is going to be a lot stronger the more units you end up having. And I'm not necessarily sure if you're even going to want to have Lupa and work with her on your team if you don't have at least one of these two units. I would say it's probably really, really, really recommended to own one of these two before pulling Lupa. Otherwise, I feel like you're going to be really disappointed in what she's actually going to be able to provide. It's pretty clear from her signature set, like I mentioned before, she is a bit more of a buffer, not necessarily a pure damage dealer herself. And if you're trying to use her as just a damage dealer, knowing what her capabilities actually are, I think you're going to end up a little bit disappointed. So own a Brant or own a Chang-Li. Ideally, own both if you do feel like, taking the plunge on her banner. And I think if you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for some disappointment. Another thing to note is that this is also going to be a set that you're going to have way more time to farm because Lupa's not going to be available in the second state until the second phase. And so you're likely actually going to be able to get Lupa an ideal set for everything you want her to do prior to her actual release, because she's coming out in the second phase, and these will be available ASAP. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the mobs that are going to be working with this set. So we're going to have the Pilgrim Shell again, the Carousel, and the new 4-cost Echo that's going to be in this patch. And what the devs have done is actually give us a bit of a preview. This is the 4-cost Echo from the new boss that's available, and it just summons like basically a battlefield of halberds to come up and pierce the enemies. So it looks like a summon Echo, very seamless to use, no real interruptions, and should fit amazingly with Lupa's kit. And it's going to be a lot of like the similar enemies that we were looking at before. It looks like 5 of the Drakes will drop this set, so you'll be able to farm a lot of it in Avenolium. Do keep that in mind. These are the baseline monsters. I believe this is the Archer and the LaGuardia, which are in Avenolium. 2 of the Drakes that are in Avenolium, and then the Fusion Spectro Havoc one, and then as well, the Devotee's Flesh. Then the Pilgrim Shell and the Carousel will drop the other half of the set. And so ideally, right, if you're just going ahead, you're doing some farming, and you want to build out both sets at the same time and be the most efficient possible in your farm, I would just stick with farming these 3 Drakes, as well as the Pilgrim Shell and the Carousel, for your 3 costs and your 1 cost, and you should be actually able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. However, when it comes to the unborn Echoes, I would also be very, very surprised if they don't end up sharing the same exact tacit field, because they're both new additions. They both have monsters that drop both sets, and if you're using the unborn Echo farming method, it's likely that you'll end up getting both of them in the same way. Because, let's be honest here, right? Half of the enemies that you're seeing over here are exactly the same. Straight up, exactly the same. So yeah, that'll be our overview. That'll be our tips when it comes to pre-farming, when it comes to building, when it comes to like progression of the 2 new sets that we're going to be seeing over here. My general advice when it comes to whether or not these are a must farm is pretty simple. If you plan on pulling Cartethyia and using her in a team, you should probably really start farming this set. You should probably start desperately farming this set. I would just say, if you want like the best sort of team possible, farm 2 of these, 1 for Aero Rover, 1 for Cartethyia, and then have a Gust of Welkin on the side. And that'll give like the most overall damage bonuses, because Aero Rover is a pretty significant damage dealer, and they could really use this crit. When it comes to Flaming Clawprint, there's a bit of an issue over here, ladies and gentlemen. It's really only usable on Lupa. There's kind of no other way to get any benefit at all from this set other than to put it on Lupa. It is objectively worse than Molten Rift on pretty much every other fusion user in the game. But it does give a 15% supportive fusion boost to the entire team, and it will make the whole Brant, Chang-Li, Lupa lineup feel particularly quite strong. I think it'll actually be pretty good. And if you do want to play that team, go for it. But if you're not pulling Lupa and you don't want it, I don't think it's necessarily worth it. I do think that you're going to be in for a bit of a rough ride trying to make this work if you don't really have that great lineup going. So I would have to say, great on the newer characters, not too great on many others, but Windward Pilgrimage has the nice bonus of actually probably being Aero Rover's best in slot. So yeah, that'll be our overall coverage. Hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully we've given you all some tips on what to do day 1 of this patch, and even the days leading up to this patch, to get up and running as fast as possible on these newest units. So with that, let me know what you all think. Peace.